Day 7. Moving beyond the victim mindset. During the first week of this journey, we have explored responsibility, hidden behavioral patterns, limiting beliefs, internal narratives, and the fears that often prevent people from pursuing their full potential. While each of these topics is important, they all connect to a larger question. How do we respond to the challenges and difficulties that life inevitably places in our path? The answer to that question often determines far more than our circumstances ever will. Every person experiences setbacks. Every person encounters unfair situations, disappointments, losses, failures, and moments that test their resilience. No amount of positive thinking or personal development can eliminate these realities. To be human is to face adversity at various points throughout life. What separates people, however, is not the difficulty of the challenges they face, but the meaning they assign to those challenges. Some individuals experience hardship and gradually begin to see themselves as powerless. They become convinced that their lives are primarily shaped by forces outside their control. Over time, this belief influences the way they think, the decisions they make, and the expectations they have for the future. Others may face equally difficult circumstances, yet maintain a different perspective. They acknowledge the reality of their situation without allowing it to define their identity. They focus on what can be learned, what can be controlled, and what actions remain available to them. The difference between these two approaches is often described as the difference between a victim mindset and an ownership mindset. Before we go any further, it is important to clarify something. Having a victim mindset does not mean someone has never been a victim. Many people have experienced genuine hardship. Some have faced circumstances that were deeply unfair and completely beyond their control. Recognizing this reality is important because personal growth should never require denying legitimate pain or pretending that difficult experiences did not happen. The distinction lies elsewhere. The victim mindset emerges when a painful experience becomes a permanent lens through which every future experience is viewed. It occurs when someone begins to believe that because they were powerless in one situation, they are powerless in all situations. It occurs when responsibility for the future is quietly surrendered to the past. This shift often happens gradually. At first, the individual simply explains why progress is difficult. Then, they begin explaining why change is unlikely. Eventually, they may stop trying altogether because they have convinced themselves that their efforts will not make a meaningful difference. Over time, this perspective can become self-reinforcing. If you believe your actions have little impact, you are less likely to take action. If you take less action, your results often remain unchanged. When your results remain unchanged, it becomes easy to view them as evidence that your belief was correct. The cycle continues. One of the most damaging consequences of a victim mindset is that it shifts attention away from possibility and toward limitation. Conversations become focused on obstacles rather than solutions. Energy becomes invested in explaining why something cannot be done, rather than exploring what might be possible. Responsibility becomes something to avoid, rather than something to embrace. At first glance, this approach can seem reasonable. After all, many obstacles are real. Many difficulties are genuine. Ignoring them would be unrealistic. However, there is a significant difference between acknowledging obstacles and becoming defined by them. A person who takes ownership of their life does not pretend challenges do not exist. They simply refuse to allow those challenges to become the final word. They ask different questions. Instead of asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" they ask, "What can I learn from this?" Instead of asking, "Who is to blame?" they ask, "What can I do next?" Instead of asking, "Why is life unfair?" they ask, "How can I make the best of the situation I am facing?" These questions may appear simple, but they lead to entirely different outcomes because they direct attention toward action rather than helplessness. If you study people who consistently overcome adversity, you will notice a common characteristic. They are not necessarily more talented, more intelligent, or more fortunate than others. What often distinguishes them is their refusal to surrender responsibility for their future. They understand that while they cannot always control events, they can control their response to those events. This understanding creates resilience. Resilience is not the ability to avoid difficulty. It is the ability to continue moving forward despite difficulty. It is the capacity to adapt, recover, and grow, even when circumstances are less than ideal. One reason resilience is so powerful is that life rarely unfolds according to plan. Careers encounter setbacks, relationships experience challenges, businesses face uncertainty, health issues arise, unexpected events disrupt carefully prepared strategies. If success depended on perfect conditions, very few people would ever achieve anything meaningful. The individuals who ultimately succeed are usually those who learn to work with reality rather than waiting for reality to become perfect. This does not mean suppressing emotions or pretending everything is fine when it is not. Healthy growth requires honesty. There will be moments when disappointment, frustration, sadness, or anger are entirely appropriate responses. The key is not whether these emotions appear. The key is whether they become permanent residents or temporary visitors. People who remain trapped in a victim mindset often build their identity around past wounds. Their story becomes centered on what happened to them. While those experiences may be real and significant, they gradually begin to overshadow everything else. People who move beyond that mindset take a different approach. They acknowledge their past without allowing it to dictate their future. They learn from their experiences without becoming defined by them. They recognize their pain without building their identity around it. Perhaps the most empowering realization a person can have is that their future does not need to resemble their past. The circumstances that shaped yesterday do not automatically determine tomorrow. The mistakes you have made do not have to become lifelong labels. The disappointments you have experienced do not have to become permanent expectations. Every day presents an opportunity to respond differently, think differently, and act differently. That opportunity exists regardless of where you started. As we reach the end of this first week, take a moment to reflect on the themes we have explored so far. Responsibility, awareness, beliefs, narratives, and fear all influence the way we experience life. Yet each of them ultimately leads back to a single choice. Will you allow your circumstances to define you? Or will you define yourself by the way you respond to your circumstances? That choice is available every day. And while it may not change your life overnight, it can gradually change the direction of your life over time. In many cases, that is where the most meaningful transformations begin. Reflection questions. 1. Are there areas of your life where you focus more on what has happened to you than on what you can do next? 2. What challenges from your past still influence the way you view your future? 3. How do you typically respond when things do not go according to plan? 4. What questions do you ask yourself during difficult situations? 5. What would change if you focused more on your influence than your limitations? Daily action step. Think about a current challenge in your life. Write a brief description of the situation. Then create 2 columns. In the first column, list everything that is outside your control. In the second column, list every action, decision, or response that remains within your control. For the next week, direct your attention primarily toward the second column. Success affirmation. I cannot control every circumstance, but I can control my response. I choose ownership over helplessness, growth over excuses, and action over resignation.